Hi, I'm Carol Clark with the Los Alamos Daily Post newspaper, and we're here at our downtown Los Alamos headquarters to videotape a debate between Los Alamos County Sheriff Marco Lucero, who's a Democrat, and his Republican opponent, Jaret McDonald. And each of their campaign committees submitted 4 questions that they would like me to ask the opponent. So we will begin now. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for having us.
So we'll start with you, Sheriff Marco Lucero, if you don't mind. This question is from the McDonald campaign.
Yes, ma'am.
Los Alamos County has heard that you do not want to increase the charter. Why have you continually since 2011 asked for more budget and things such as a sheriff's vehicle? The entire sheriff's budget is approximately $81.6 thousand per year. Adding a vehicle purchase per your request would increase this by $26,000. How does this help taxpayers? Also, in the last fiscal year, how do you explain a 541.9% increase of actual expenditures over the approved travel budget?
That's a good question. Carol, since I started back in 2010 when I was elected, I was for providing professional services to the residents of Los Alamos County. I took the oath of office, and I take the office very seriously. In order to provide services to help the people of Los Alamos to do my job, to make it more efficient and more safe for our kids, and to make the community safer, I requested a vehicle because I travel throughout the state in my personal vehicle now to meet with sheriffs throughout New Mexico to discuss safety and issues that concern the sheriff's office. Now, when you take the office of the sheriff seriously, you try to improve the services that you provide. By increasing the travel budget, I know that's 2 questions in one, but I'll go ahead and answer that one as well. It's no secret that I'm very active with the New Mexico Sheriff's Association, the Western States Sheriff's Association, and the National Sheriff's Association. Each one of those are vital networking times when I go out and actually receive training to maintain my certification. By law, I'm required to have 40 hours of advanced training every year to maintain my certification, which I do. And part of this travel encompasses some of that. So when I go to a meeting for the National Sheriffs out of state, I have very important meetings that I discuss with other sheriffs around the nation, concerns that sheriffs have throughout the nation. And it's where I actually picked up on the Offender Watch program, which I pushed here in the state of New Mexico, and we adopted here in Los Alamos because of my networking with the other sheriffs throughout the country.
On the Offender Watch program, that's the sex offender program?
Yes, ma'am. That's the website that we implemented here in the state of New Mexico. I heard about this when I was attending a conference back in St. Louis through the National Sheriff's Association, and it was a new software that was available to sheriffs to provide the public so that they're aware of the sex offenders that are registered here in the state and their community, that are actually, so they have a proximity to their residents, know where they're at, and close to their school. So they could actually click on that website, it's on the sheriff's link, and click on it and actually see who the registered sex offenders in our county and where they live.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Did that answer your questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so this question is from the Lucero campaign to Jaret McDonald. You have mentioned that if elected, you would transfer current services being provided under Sheriff Lucero's administration to the Los Alamos Police Department. You also discussed your intent to save Los Alamos County money by doing this. In addition, you mentioned your experience in business. How is it more cost efficient to transfer these duties to a far more costly agency?
Thank you for that question. So for starters, what I proposed, or what I'm considering proposing, and I believe it's a very good idea, is potentially transferring the sex offender, let's say, excuse me, the sex offender duties of the sheriff to the police department. And let me explain why. Mostly because I believe that the police department is actually a full-time law enforcement agency with a law enforcement mandate. And I feel that they might be better served, that residents might be better served by having the police department do it as opposed to a part-time sheriff's position in Los Alamos. Because I do think it's a very serious issue, and I want to make sure that we have the best coverage for our community, for our children, and for the residents.
Okay. Does that answer the question for you, Sheriff?
Somewhat, yes. So-
Because feel free, if you have, either of you want to ask a little more in-depth, feel
Would you
free.
mind if I-
Please.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay, so by law and state statute, I want it clear that it is mandated by the state that those duties are assigned to the county sheriff. And you can't actually transfer them to the police department. It's impossible.
Okay. Okay.
I think that based on what Sheriff Lucero has said, I believe it's also a judgment opinion, and let me explain. Los Alamos is a Class H county, okay? We have our municipal and our county roles into one body. In 1968, the county adopted this charter, and in 1976, the roles of the sheriff were challenged in the First District Court. And First District Court came back and said, you know what, Los Alamos County, you can determine the roles of the sheriff in Los Alamos County. So therefore, that's why I believe that that is something that should be looked at and considered.
Okay.
I know this is going to expand a lot more than what we first started off with, but I had the opportunity when I first ran for the office. I spoke with then Sheriff Larry Vaughn, who was the sheriff back in 1976. He was actually appointed the position by the county administration. And speaking with him, he didn't file that lawsuit and he didn't file that complaint. And he didn't have any intentions of doing law enforcement because he worked full-time at the laboratory. So he wasn't filing a suit against Los Alamos County. It was a suit brought over by the county. And he had no interest in, he wasn't a certified officer. And he worked full-time at the lab. And he didn't fight for law enforcement authority in Los Alamos.
Okay.
My authority comes from my state certification and wanting to give back to the community.
Okay. Okay, this question is from the McDonald campaign to you, Sheriff.
That's, okay, that's great.
It's your turn,
Right.
correct. So, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
You just keep going back and forth.
Yes. Why would you forward the sheriff's office telephone to your personal telephone after hours, knowing that if there was an emergency or urgent matter, that you couldn't help a person or persons without a precious time loss, having to call 911 or the Los Alamos Police Department?
Great question. Okay, I have the phones forwarded to me after hours and off hours. The reason I do that is so I can maintain that accessibility to the county and to the people that need my services. When I receive calls to that number, those are people that are making telephone calls to the sheriff's office. So I could actually speed up that time, precious time, to patch them straight over to dispatch. So when I get calls in the middle of the night saying it's mostly about questions about services of orders, looking for inmates that are in the jail, once in a while it's looking for an accident. They've called the sheriff's office number and I've led them straight to dispatch so that they can get an officer down there. So it actually enhances it. If you have a 911 emergency, everybody knows that you dial 911 and that goes straight to our dispatch center.
Okay. Okay. This question is from the Lucero campaign committee to Jaret McDonald. We understand that you claimed that you were part of the Mounted Patrol Volunteer Program, which requires only 8 hours per month to ride along with a certified officer. You have mentioned that you have over a decade of law enforcement experience and that you have an extensive law enforcement background. A search of the New Mexico Department of Public Safety and the New Mexico Law Enforcement Academy shows no record of your certification for graduating from even the basic law enforcement academy. How can you claim this extensive law enforcement background having never been certified?
Good question. Yes, I absolutely went through the New Mexico Mounted Patrol Academy, and I had a commission card for almost 5 years, not quite 5 years. As far as a decade of law enforcement experience, you know, part of when you're in Mounted Patrol, you have to put in a heck of a lot of time, because it is volunteer, to attend the academies, that type of thing. It's unfortunate it wasn't found in the database, but I was able to contact my folks down there and find out my durations and terms of when I was actually a commissioned law enforcement officer.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a comment?
No, I think he answered it well. He's not certified, and I think he just admitted that, so that's fine.
How come you're not certified? You were, but they didn't enter it?
So there's a difference between being certified and commissioned. Okay, I was a commissioned law enforcement officer, which basically meant that I had met the minimum requirements, had gone through the minimum academy requirements and that type of thing, and served our public, mostly in Espanola. One of the neat things about New Mexico Mounted Patrol is you're only on duty, or you're only authorized as a law enforcement entity when you're serving another agency. For example, Forest Service, Game and Fish, State Police, so on. And so you don't hold any other authorities unless you're supporting them. But when you're supporting those authorities, you hold those same authorities as the agency you assist. For example, there have been a couple times where it was really exciting. I was able to be a bodyguard when Bill Clinton was here through New Mexico Mounted Patrol, which was really exciting.
Okay.
Again, I just want to clarify, he's never actually been through the basic law enforcement academy, and he is not a certified officer.
Okay. Okay. Marco Lucero, this question is for you from the McDonald Campaign Committee. The charter is very clear in regards to the roles of the sheriff being civil, not criminal law enforcement. Do you feel that the roles should be changed? Why or why not?
Well, you know what? It's quite the opposite. The charter is very vague when it comes to the role of the sheriff, and it actually contradicts itself. It first says that the sheriff is a peace officer and vested with all the authority therein. And then it contradicts itself by going back and saying shall not duplicate the duties of LAPD. Now, this is something I tried to clear up 3 years ago when I submitted the petition to try to clarify the charter. Now, I took an oath 26 years ago when I first became an officer to uphold the peace and enforce the laws. As a state certified officer, and according to the state statute, I am required, as your sheriff, to conduct criminal investigations. If an investigation is brought to my attention as your sheriff, and I refuse to look into it, I could be held criminally liable, facing criminal charges. I don't overextend my authority. I do what I can to work in cooperation with our police department. Most of these guys are my friends that I've known since I was working in Santa Fe. You know, they know me, they know my work history and my work experience. And when they have a case that they think I could help with, they come to me. And when I have a case that I think they could help me with, I go to them. We have open communication. When I did the investigation, I think probably the only ever investigation conducted by a sheriff in Los Alamos, I was approached by a commander in the Los Alamos Police Department who knew my work history, came to me when I got elected, And he said, Sheriff, I think this is right for you. This is perfect for you. Can you handle this?
And I think we'll ask you to explain that in further detail. It's a question on here coming up.
Okay, well, I'll hold off on that part.
Okay,
then.
good.
I'll hold off on that part. I just want to say that the charter isn't very clear. And I'm not here to buck the charter. I'm all for Los Alamos. This is what the county I'm invested in. I live here. I raised my kids here. I'm here to help keep the community safe and work in cooperation with our police department and federal agents.
Is that good for you? Okay. So this question is from the Lucero Campaign Committee. In the forum hosted by the League of Women Voters, you mentioned that you have worked undercover. This is a distinct difference, there is a distinct difference between working undercover and being an informant to law enforcement officers. To have worked undercover, one must be employed by a law enforcement agency. It also requires that you are a certified officer with the authority to write affidavits for arrest warrants to the district or U.S. attorneys. How can you claim this, that you worked undercover without having that authority?
Sure, good question. So first off, let me start my response by saying I think it's really great that we're having a conversation about law enforcement. It is important. And when I performed work undercover, that's what we consider undercover work. We went and I worked for the FBI for nearly almost 2 years. I was not a law enforcement agent, okay, when I did this undercover work. So it might be a misconception, but I absolutely was performing work for the FBI for, like I said, a couple of years. And I think, continue on that. It's really great that we're having this conversation about law enforcement, but I think it's important to remember that the Sheriff of Los Alamos County doesn't need a law enforcement background, as has been amply demonstrated by previous persons in this position.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. This question is from the McDonald Campaign Committee. You have claimed that an arrest you conducted, and this goes back to what you were starting to talk about, that incident. You have claimed that an arrest you conducted regarding a convicted sex offender, which you initiated the investigation, drafted an arrest warrant, and worked in cooperation with the Los Alamos Police Department. As sheriff, you are not covered by Los Alamos County under insurance and legal mandate charter to make arrests. You put our county and yourself at risk for a serious liability lawsuit. This isn't part of your duties. How is this not a duplication or overlap of duties with the Los Alamos Police Department? Also, you claim you worked with Los Alamos Police Department. How is it that the chief of police wasn't aware of the arrest beforehand, as he was dining in the same restaurant when you arrested the subject, and the chief was in complete shock?
Well, okay, let's go back to when I first started talking about this. I was brought the information by a commander within the Los Alamos Police Department. When I received this information, I initiated the investigation. And I spoke to then Chief Torpy on that day, advising him that I am going to be conducting this investigation and I would appreciate his cooperation. He agreed with me, didn't say nothing to the contrary, and I worked with his detectives. Now, on the day of the arrest, I had the U.S. Marshals up here. I brought the Los Alamos PD detectives. I went to Chief Torpy's office. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. I have his personal cell phone. I called him and he didn't answer. I left him a message and I then went to the chain of command. I went to a commander in the PD saying, this is what we have the arrest warrant and I need your help. They knew about the investigation from the onset. I never held anything back from our police. And for somebody to say that I tried to do something that was a liability to Los Alamos, I've been working in law enforcement, like I said, for 26 years. I was the commander for the SWAT team. You talk about a liability. I mean, you have to, as a commander, you got to make sure that the residences are all checked out, that the search warrant is all up to date, and that your SWAT team is capable of getting the job done safely to minimize liability. Liability is foremost on my attention while working in Santa Fe and working in Los Alamos. We conducted the briefing prior to the arrest up here in Los Alamos, and I felt through my experience and training and having the federal agents there and the commanders from the PD that we all agreed that the arrest was safe. When Chief Torpy was dining in that restaurant, I had tried to contact him twice prior to serving that warrant, and he didn't answer. I'd like to talk about the affidavit too, so if you have any questions about the affidavit, I have it here to prove that I actually did do the investigation.
And my understanding was that here's the fluke of it. The then county councilor, Michael Wheeler, had a skiing accident, had a broken leg, so he had to have his leg in a cast straight out. So he needed to sit in the corner with his leg coming this way so that he wouldn't, trip somebody or whatever. He could be more comfortable. And so that's why usually law enforcement officers have their back against a wall. They don't want to have someone come up from behind.
That's a habit I have, yes.
But that particular day, the chief's back was turned. So when you all went in and then he saw the face of Mike Wheeler, the county councilor, looking shocked, he turned and he was shocked, So,
and all he had to do was answer his phone.
So, any further on that, Jaret? No. Okay. So, and was that the only arrest that you've done like that?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you do more if it came up?
Most definitely.
Okay. Okay. Now, this question comes from the Lucero Campaign Committee to Jaret McDonald. Let me make sure.
Are we going to go with 4 questions, or are we going to keep
4.
Okay, go ahead and skip to the 5th one.
Okay. Sheriff Lucero currently provides services on a daily basis as the elected sheriff, which can be quite demanding while working a full-time job. You have an obligation to your current full-time employer. You, Jaret McDonald, have an obligation to your current full-time employer to work 40 hours per week. If in parallel, if elected, you will also have an obligation to Los Alamos residents as a public service. One position will inevitably suffer. Can you give both positions the time and effort they deserve?
Good question. So if you look back in history, you can see all the previous sheriffs that have had full-time jobs, that have worked this job as a part-time position. I also know where my priorities are. My priorities are going to be with the county. Now, to even continue this, I also have a personal business as well, besides my lab position. But I'm very fortunate in that I've been in this business for a long time, that it's turnkey. I have plenty of employees that handle this business, that I don't have to be there all the time. The laboratory is also wonderful as far as people that are elected to positions, because they do give you actually some paid leave as an elected position to perform duties that are necessary. If elected, I understand that my responsibilities will absolutely be with the county and the voters and the residents, and I will absolutely make sure that I fulfill that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, that concludes the 4 questions each. Thank you very much, both of you, for participating.
Carol, I want to thank you for hosting this. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
This was fun. And I didn't need Band-Aids yet.